Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your hosts, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, welcome to Hope After Addiction. We are so excited that you have decided to join us again for our conversation today. I'm just so excited. We've been talking about it for a little bit before we got started about how powerful testimonies are. And we get to witness today Chelsea's testimony. I'm just so excited. We'll do my testimony next week, but I'm just so excited. I know a little bit about your testimony. I've known you for a lot of years. So I know a little bit about your testimony, just knowing you, meeting with you one-on-one. But I'm excited just to get to the nitty-gritty of your testimony and just seeing how God has really worked in your life to where you are today, leading a podcast about finding hope after what you've gone through with John. So I'm going to give it to you to hear about what God's done in your life. So
Awesome. Okay. I'm excited, and I just pray, that's my prayers, that you guys can find some kind of hope or similarity to know that you're not alone just through this testimony. So there's just a few things that I want to start with. This is raw and real, and it is the first time I've shared it with the world, shared it with a lot of people, but this is the first time just it's open and out there. Second thing is, one of my realizations to my life and my testimony is these are chapters to my book. These are not my whole book, but they're bits and pieces to the chapters that make up my life story. The other thing is, this is where I found freedom. And little did I know that walking through what I've been through, that God was going to work amazing grace out of that. I remember going through, I was trying to think, I was in my late 20s and just asking God, like, God, why has addiction riddled my life since I was 4? And not understanding. And now I guess the silver lining is I do see what he was working in that. So I'm going to start with my dad. That is where my story with addiction, and this is my testimony more through addiction, to talk about where it all started and just what I've been through. Because I know we're going to have wives listening and sisters listening and brothers and fathers and children. And so this is where my story of loving as a child. But I loved my dad. Mom and dad were married, had me and my little brother. And then, and I might get emotional through this because it is raw.
it's good.
I've healed a lot through it, but it's still,
That's all right.
yeah. So, loved my dad so much. Daddy's girl. And mom and dad had to separate because he was in the fit of addiction. So he's a very dangerous, angry person. And we would still visit on the weekends. We met at Dairy Queen every other Friday, and I was so excited to meet him. We'd always get I got a Hawaiian Blizzard, was my favorite.
Really? What's
Yes,
in it?
it's where pineapple, coconut, banana, and nuts. So weird. Not even on the menu, but they still know it and make it.
I'm not sure
if you
about
ever
all of
ask.
it.
I know. Sounds
But it's
so
okay.
weird, but it's so good. Childhood
all right.
memory. I know.
It's okay.
So, yes. So,
That's
Mom
good.
and Ethan and I got there that Friday afternoon to go spend the weekend with my dad, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited.
Oh.
So, it was a couple hours later, and we got back in the car to Mom's instructions and went home. And that's the last time that I would ever see my dad or think to see my dad. I still drive through that Dairy Queen parking lot when I go home to my hometown. So for years, it was, what was it like to have a dad? You know, it was always the daddy-daughter dances or the daddy breakfast, or when I played sports, you know, I'd hit a home run, and what would it feel like to have a dad say, you know, I'm so proud of you for that, or you look beautiful when you walk down in your prom dress. Like, I didn't know what that felt like. And so my whole life, I spoke to myself and told me that a pill was more important than me, and that I was not worthy enough for a dad, a person, anybody. And so that's things that I just poured into my thoughts and my mind for years. So part of that has built the aftermath of who I am today. And so that's been hard. There's days that if people could read my thoughts, I should say in the past, they would be crippled by the thoughts and the pain that I went through, and just the aloneness that I felt not having a daddy. Because I think it's a desire in your heart. Every child has a yearning for a parent, especially a father. And so that's something that I've really had to work through. Mom, well, first off, my dad actually lived 40 minutes away from me my entire life. We were at the mall back to school shopping when I was 14 and passed him, and I had no idea that it was my father. Wow. So Mom gave me a box of my stuff about 8 years ago, my childhood stuff that she had held on, and I sat down in my living room one night and just went through it, and it's the first time that I had seen all the pictures of me and my dad, and me on his lap and me laying on his chest, and I sobbed for 3 hours. I mean, just the feeling of knowing that I did have that relationship with my father until pills took him. And I also found all the other pictures of me as a little girl, and I clung. Every picture was me clinging to my grandfather or clinging to my uncles because I yearned and wanted so much that love from a father. So when I was about 25, we have a family cabin we've gone to every year. It's my papa's thing. My papa is who stepped into the role of my father figure. I lost him this year, so that's been a whole other thing. But I remember standing on that porch, and I was just in a really dark place, and it's a very introspective place for me. And I was standing out there, and I just heard, Chelsea, you've had a father this entire time. I've been right here waiting on you. And something in me changed that day. And Psalms 68:5 says he's a father to the fatherless. And there's so many verses in the Bible that speak of that. I just found one in Exodus last night. I'm sure I've read it, but I just did not recollect to it. But he's always been there. And I think back to that, and he was always right there beside me. So I started digging into healing, to counseling, to working through the past of my father, the decisions that I had made, the regret. I started making poor decisions just out of the pain of not having a father. And so jump to, I guess I was about 26. We actually went to, John and I'll get to his story later, but we were in Costa Rica. I had been having kidney trouble for years, and my kidneys actually shut down in Costa Rica.
What?
Crazy
I didn't know this story.
Yeah, I was yellow from head to toe. We wrecked our rental car while we were there trying to get to the hospital. It was a nightmare, a mess. We rushed back, drove through the night to get me to the hospital in Savannah, and I was full of kidney stones, and found out my doctor told me that I had a kidney disease. And I had the worst results of anybody that she had seen or talked to in her entire medical career. So there had been a yearning on my heart to forgive my father, to find him and speak forgiveness to him, because that's where my heart was positioned at that time. I had finally come to that. So I had been following my dad's jail records for quite a few years, and I found the most recent address to him, and I put a letter in the mail, and it said, I think 26 years has been long enough. I would love to talk to you. Signed, your daughter. And I put that in the mail.
It's powerful.
And 3 days later, I'm actually a cosmetologist by trade, and I was doing a client's hair, and my phone rang, and it was a Greenville, South Carolina number, and it was him. So it's a very heavy day. I walked outside and talked to him, and he was like an old, crippled man, and I forgot that it had been 20-something years since I had spoke to him. And the last time I'd heard from him, I was 4. So we get home. I can't get a hold of him that night. So all the feelings of abandonment just rushed right back over me. And the next night, we had set up to talk, and we sat on the bed, and I had a conversation with my father for the first time for about 30 minutes. And I let him talk, and I just wanted to hear, and this is so sad and so selfish, but I wanted to know that he had hurt the way that I had. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to hear his heart, that he endured the pain that I had for so many years. Mm-hmm. What I realized that night is I think he hurt more than I did. Wow. And so he told me about my middle name. It's Elizabeth, what it means, that it means strength, and about my childhood. He still had my baby clothes that he would sit in the room and just cry with still. And I learned a lot that night about my dad. And at the end, I told him, I said, God has put so many special people in my life since you stepped out. And I just want to tell you that I've forgiven you. And his words were, I don't deserve forgiveness. And I said, everybody deserves forgiveness. And he said, I have to go. So we had planned to talk the next night. We hung up the phone that night and we never talked again. And he went to jail 2 days later. And I asked John, I said, when I found that out, I was very emotional. I said, do you think that I caused my dad to go back to jail? And it's those feelings of guilt and just shame. And John's like, Chelsea, you can't do that to yourself. Mm-hmm. Like, you did not cause him to go back to jail. So the crazy thing is, let me go to this. Let me go back to this. Well, I was going to say 4 years later to the date, we ended up getting pregnant with our miracle baby, Jasper.
Oh, Jasper, he's so cute.
Yes, he's such a stinker. We'll put a picture up, but his name actually means treasure.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
When we were doing our gender reveal, my mom was in town, and she said, Chelsea, I feel like Jasper's going to be a boy because I feel like God is going to restore your faith in men.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, Mom. So we did our gender reveal, and Jasper was a boy.
Yeah.
And we had Jasper April 30th of 2021, and my dad overdosed and died 15 hours later. And so it's just crazy how...
That is wild. Yeah.
Wild. And like what God...
Oh my goodness.
Restored, he also like let go and
yeah.
had closure. But I realized from that season of my father and speaking to him that the power of forgiveness, because this is where I was going to go, is I was healed of that kidney disease. After I forgave my father, there is no trace of a kidney disease in my body. I've had nephrologists check it, my OB check it during pregnancy because they were worried about my pregnancy. There is no trace of a kidney disease. And I think all those years of unforgiveness manifested in my body, and I was able to get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy and no longer have a kidney disease. And God healed me and allowed forgiveness. And the thing with forgiveness came a sadness for him. I was no longer angry at him. My heart cried out for him. So that's the story of addiction with my dad. Let me get back to my brother is the next one. And I would say definitely have a trauma bond because of what we went through as children.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But he went through all the things of abandonment and just the sad feelings of not having a father. And my brother started drugs at about 12, and he was in and out of prison for the next 10 years. And so I remember spending every Christmas in the jailhouse. We would stop and get Waffle House and go sit in a jail cell every Christmas morning for years to visit him. And I have such a heart for him, for sure.
Yeah.
He's one of the best people I know. He just fights those demons, but he is fighting in a way that he never has. He's in church every Sunday and during the week and going to counseling finally.
Oh,
and
that's good.
Yeah, he's in his 30s now and just he's done really well for himself outside of that. But I know the sibling, there were a lot of days of pain that Mom had to focus on Ethan because I was the easy one and she had to have all her focus. So I was over there, and I had a counselor ask me one time, who did you talk to? Like, who did you run to? And I thought, and I was like, nobody. Like, I didn't have anybody. And I remember one counselor telling me one time, and I loved him so much, and he said, I want you to close your eyes. And he said, I want you to envision now the girl that you are, the woman that you are today, going back to that little girl and telling her that everything is going to be okay. And I want you to go back to high school, and I want you to tell her that everything's going to be okay. And I still hang on to that because even going through what I did with John, telling her everything's going to be okay. And I want to encourage you of that no matter what season you're going through, tell yourself everything is going to be okay. And God is going to walk me through this. Yeah. So we'll move to John, who many of y'all know.
Johnny John.
Johnny John, big old teddy bear.
Yeah.
Yes, so crazy. He is my husband.
Crazy.
Crazy.
So crazy.
Only God.
Oh
Only God, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So, and I have asked for permission to share all of this. And he
Yeah.
is like, please do
Yeah.
anything you want to share. This is my story. Many of y'all that know John know his story because he's told you. Very open about it. But we met over a random FaceTime call. I lived in his hometown. And it was crazy. And he was like, hey, can I take you on a date when I come home? And I'm like, sure. I'll never see you again. You know, like
right.
it's FaceTime. I think
Yeah.
you're intoxicated, whatever. So, mind you, too, at this point, I was living a very lukewarm Christian life. I had yo-yoed a lot and always the strong believer, always in church on Sundays.
Right.
But I was the girl that drank wine in my Bible studies. I was the that was our regular Wednesday pattern. I was living a very lukewarm, sinful life. And so I never want to put, because I had my own stuff that I was working through. So we ended up going on a date.
Okay.
He called me and was like, can I take you out? I was like, yes. And the rest is history. We fell in love. He moved back home. And it's funny because now we can tell that God moved him back home to bring him to the end of his addiction. So he had moved away, moved to Alaska, moved to Florida, lived in South Dakota, professional hunter and fisher, lived the life, but he was always using where he went. And he would run from next location to next location. And so when he moved back home, addiction literally just surrounded him again. And he went back to all the things that he had started with. And it got really nasty really quick. And I had no idea. So we would drink together and stuff, but I had no idea that he was chasing the opiates and the other things that he was.
Right.
So things started to not make sense. Money didn't make sense. Stories didn't make sense. Temperaments didn't make sense. I mean, we would just fight. Like, he would just come home and start a fight. And I'm like, what is happening? Later, he'll tell you he would come home to start a fight to be able to leave again, to go get high. And so all of this stuff, I know that we had this crazy love story, but it started to not make sense. And so things happened. I found a straw in the bathroom one time, and I looked, and there was powder, and I was like, okay, something's not. So that was our first story. The tears, it was just a one-time thing. Mm-hmm. So everything started moving and moving. And so I was still in counseling. I love counseling. I believe in counseling. Whoever's not in it should get in it. It's awesome.
Yes. So good. Yeah.
So good. But I was leaving, driving down our coastal road, and I remember God saying, okay, let me preface this. I had pain pills from when my kidney shut down, because it was the most excruciating pain. I had a natural labor, and kidneys were worse.
Yeah, I've had kidney stones before too. In labor.
Awful.
I think they are worse.
They are. Like, they're worse.
I mean, I'm sure everybody has their own opinions on that. But yeah,
they're bad. They're bad.
Yeah, for sure.
And I hated the things because of what it did to my father. And so I wouldn't touch him. I did that, because I had to. And God said, go check your pill bottle. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And I fought with him on that ride. I was like, God, what are you? And I knew something was off. So I went home, looked at and I didn't think anything about it. It was out on the counter, and my pills were gone. And I was like, okay. So that was the first solid evidence that I had that something was off. And so I called John, and I was like, you need to get home right now. And I did. I let him have it, but with love. And I was like, you're not, I come from this, and I will not continue to walk in this. I was like, it's either me or the pills, but it's not both. So he's like, okay, and he kind of told me everything. He's like, I'm ready to get help. I thought I could quit on my own. Okay. So we started this journey at home of him quitting. Detox at the house, everything. So we've all heard that story, I think, of I can do it on my own. Yeah. And so I was going to say there's so much. Went to the Keys that summer. It was awful. And I had decided at that point, that's it. So he went to a secular 12-step AA program it was a place in Georgia. And it was like a jail. I mean, had to have a belt on, had to have shoes with socks on, sandals with socks. It was a jail. So we had a hurricane come to the coast. He left to come home, manipulation. But little did we know, even Adam said this, it was God.
Yeah.
Came home, and he, sorry, just catching up. There's so much. The slippery slope began. And this is a crazy story. And I want to encourage you that God gives you a discernment and always will, just like telling me to go check the pill bottle.
Isn't that the truth?
Whew.
Yes.
And
true.
trust it. And
Yes.
it's taken me, I
Yes.
still don't trust it. I'm learning.
Yeah.
He had gone to West Virginia for a weekend, and I'm a runner. I woke up that Saturday morning and I had the realest dream, and I was sobbing running. And he called me. He was like, hey, we talked the whole weekend. And he said, what is going on? I said, I just had a dream. It's just a trigger. I'm having to work through it. He's like, well, just tell me. I wouldn't tell him. So I had a dream that night he was around a campfire and had Budweiser beers, which he wasn't supposed to be doing anything, of course. So he gets home, and I'm walking up the stairs, and I hear God say, ask him if he needs to tell you anything. And I was like, no, God. Like, I can't start a fight. I can't. And he said, ask him. So I looked down at him and I said, is there anything you need to tell me about this weekend? He said, yeah. He said, I had 3 Budweisers sitting around the campfire. And I just lost it. And I looked at him and I said, that was my dream Friday night. So when I say God gives you discernment, he does, and to trust. So that's where it all started from there. He decided to go back to treatment, but he wanted it to be Christ-centered faith-based. So that's when we found S2L, and it changed his life. When I dropped him off, I was done. I was done. Washed my hands.
Yeah. Bye.
I did. Peace out.
Yeah.
I boarded a flight to Portugal, and it's my 30th birthday, and I wanted a reset. Like, I needed another country. I needed a different surrounding. And I went, and we talked a little bit, and then I started to see a change in him and a light in him, and something was different about him. And I started to have a little bit of hope, because I had lost all of it. I had quit eating. I had quit sleeping. I remember one of our friends came up to John, and he looked at him, and he said, what have you done to her? He said, she used to light up a room. He said, she's a shell of a person now. Yeah. And that killed, because I knew that other people saw how hollow I was and how dead I felt, like walking through addiction with him. And I began to wake up in the morning with joy because he was in a safe place. I wasn't worried about him. I didn't. Yeah. So he was there. And then about 3 weeks in, he was like, Chelsea, I want to go into ministry. Like, this is my heart. Like, this is my story. And so long story short, we are married. We have a miracle baby. He went into full-time ministry. We haven't walked this perfect. I mean, it has been messy. We have done so many healing retreats and counseling and things to regain that trust and betrayal and work through the triggers that we have. And I can say today, and I think I said it last episode, but I have the husband that I have because of addiction. Our families are saved and go into heaven because of addiction. I am the woman that I am today. I know Christ intimately because of addiction. Yeah. I know the surrender. Katie and I both have a crazy surrender story, but on my bedroom floor in tear-stained pillows. Yeah. And every time I change my pillowcase, I still am reminded with mascara on those pillows to where I was like, God, I can't do this. It's such a sweet reminder. And so God has been so faithful and so good. I was trying to think. There's just so much good. But I just want you to know you're not alone. I've had a dad walk out on me. I've had a dad overdose and die on me. I found my husband overdosed and dead. Only by the power of prayer did it bring him back to life. And that's a miracle story for another day. I've watched my husband hold a gun to his head. I told you it was going to get raw and real, and it is. And these are some of the things that we've been through. But I want you to know that no matter what you've been through, you're not alone. And I want you to hear that, and I want you to know that. That's right. Because Katie and I know all too much how lonely this season is.
And that's why we're here.
Yes.
To help you not feel as lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
I have a couple questions. Can I ask you?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So as you were talking, I'm just curious to know, when your dad passed away, how did you deal with that? And then right after the arrival of your newborn son, like, I mean, like, how did you deal with it?
that was a heavy one. And I'll tell you, God's hand was in that because I didn't have my phone in the hospital. I had given it to John because I wanted to focus on that moment. And my voicemail was full, which tends to happen a lot. So the detective called my phone. By the grace of God, I didn't answer, nor were they able to leave a message to tell me that my dad had passed away.
Yeah.
So my family chose to not tell me for a week, to let me have that time with Jasper. And but I think the best answer to that question is forgiveness. Because I'd had that moment with forgiveness for him and with him, my closure was already there.
Yeah, that's so good.
My brother doesn't have that same story, and so he has dealt with a really hard road with my dad's death because he did not have that story of forgiveness. And so forgiveness, and I encourage you, if you are fighting back, holding back forgiveness, pray that your heart changes and positions in that way, because it will change your life.
And it did for you.
It did. I was able to have that closure and grieve in the right way because I knew that I had forgiven him before he took his last breath.
Wow. That is powerful. Wow. And then my last question is, what made you keep fighting for John? I mean, why not just throw in the towel and be like, let's just start over?
Yes.
What made you keep fighting for him?
Ooh, that's a tough one. And I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Many a days. And I did. I told him, it's not because I want to do this, but I have to do this. I'm done. He came home one weekend and his boxes were all packed. That's when he went away for treatment. But I had a cousin tell us, John's cousin, who I love so dearly, and she said, I had this rule that as long as he was trying, I would try too. And I will tell you, from day one, John has never quit trying. He's never given up on us. He's never given up on fighting for his sobriety. And he's finally walking in freedom where that's not his identity. I mean, God truly took him from a professional fisher to a fisher of men.
Oh,
and that's what we say about him now, which is so awesome. And I love him so dearly. And it truly is God, he gave me a fight for him, but he used my dad and my brother to give me that fight, to fight for my husband, because John deserved that chance. And he was fighting. If John wouldn't have fought, I wouldn't say that we'd be here today. But he fought with everything that he had and still does to this day.
Wow.
So
that is so powerful. Your story is just so precious and so hard, but it is so precious. And I am so glad to know you. And I'm so glad that you took the opportunity just to share with us just the depths of your testimony, which is hard sometimes. So, but I am very thankful for you, and I'm thankful to be your friend, and I'm thankful to know you. And I hope that you found encouragement in her testimony, because I know that you all have walked some sort of journey similar to this.
Yes.
And I hope you have found encouragement in her story. So we thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.